Good morning, and thank you for tuning in to TBN today. Have you ever wondered where New Mexico stands when it comes to the national economic downturn? Well, you're not the only one. A recent study unveiled, despite the national economic downturn, tax cuts here in New Mexico are more well off. Paul Gessing with the Rio Grande Foundation is here to update us on this issue. Paul, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's get straight into it. A recent study showed that New Mexico is more prosperous compared to other states. What is New Mexico's story with Governor Bill Richardson's positive economic legacy?
Well, the Rio Grande Foundation, which is the organization I run, it's a free market think tank based here in New Mexico. We did a study on Richardson's tax cuts, which started in 2003. And New Mexico is one of the poorest states in the country and has been for a long time. And so we looked at personal income, which is a good measurement of relative levels of income. And we found that New Mexico had benefited greatly in terms of personal income over the last several years due to these tax cuts. We had been 47th for many years, as this chart indicates, and we rose over that 5-year to 6-year span up to 42nd. So we've done a little better than most states. We're still at the bottom of the economic pyramid in terms of personal income. Being 42nd out of 50 is not exactly the top of the pack, but jumping 5 spots within a short time period is an excellent result, and it shows that if you cut taxes, as we did from top rate of 8.2% to 4.9% being the current rate, and we also cut the capital gains tax by 50%, that positive things will happen.
Now, this actually was from, what, 2003 till presently, right?
Exactly.
Now, you're right, 42nd right now is huge for New Mexico, especially because we're always on the top for negative issues. So now it's, that's a good report for New Mexico. What were some of those changes, major changes, that did take effect with Governor Bill Richardson's role, if you will?
Well, the good ones were definitely the tax cuts. Anyone making $16,000 a year or more, that's where these upper level rates kicked in, got a significant tax cut. And 16,000 is really a very low number when you're talking about what someone's making annually. So those people saw rates go from 8.2 to 4.9 on anything they earned as New Mexico residents and New Mexico taxpayers. And then capital gains is something that happens when you, say, own a company or you own part of a company in a form of stock. Anything, including interest that you earn on money that you've invested, falls under that capital gains tax. And so cutting that by 50% really made a difference. Not so much maybe in the last few years when profits have been really tough for everyone to come by, but certainly over the early time period of the 2003 through 2008, when the economy was doing pretty well, New Mexicans really did well based on that capital gains cut. And so we're poised to be in a better position once the economy turns around. And once the economy does turn around, our hope is that the next governor will take the initiative and continue some kind of tax cutting strategy based on what we believe was a very successful model here.
Now, you actually brought with you several different charts with you this morning. Now, if you want to go ahead and show the next chart, and if you could put it in perspective to where we understand what we're looking at this morning.
These are 2 charts. One shows, the top one shows where we stood in 2003, which is 47th in personal income. The bottom chart shows how New Mexico leapfrogged several other states. Most notably, we leapfrogged actually our neighbors in Arizona, which most people think of Arizona as being a relatively wealthy state, but on average it's not, and it's done very poorly here in the last few years of the economic crisis. So New Mexico is actually overall a wealthier state now than Arizona. And Utah is another state that we surpassed. There's a handful of other states. When you go from 42nd to 47th to 42nd, we leapfrog 5 states. So this just illustrates how we stack up now on personal income relative to those other states. In the bottom 10, there's obviously 40 other states that are not accounted for that are still on top of New Mexico, and the people there are wealthier. But baby steps are, are a good thing.
Now, I know Oklahoma did pretty good as well. How did they compare to New Mexico, and did they basically take the same steps New Mexico did in order to do really well?
Right. The chart here on the bottom actually shows the personal income growth over the time period of the 2000s, because Oklahoma enacted its own set of tax cuts at similar time as New Mexico did. And this shows our neighboring states. New Mexico had about a 45% increase in personal income during the 2000s decade, so from 2000 to 2009. Oklahoma also did very well. Now, both states had a little further to come. Texas, a state that lacks a personal income tax, did relatively well, but they lacked a personal income tax before, and they still lack one, so you didn't have a policy change to drive it even further. And then some of those other states, Colorado, Arizona, and whatnot, they really fell behind kind of because of their tax policies didn't improve at all, and various economic factors caused them to slide further down.
Now, with the charts that you just showed us and our viewing audience this morning, so overall, what does the study and charts tell New Mexico about the consistent positive growth rate overall the past decade, most especially because there had been 2 different recessions that this fell under?
Right. Well, it shows that you can have a positive impact by doing the right things in state policy, and that means eliminating taxes or reducing them on pro-growth activities. That means people who earn money and are actively bringing home a paycheck to their families. It's important that we not reduce the incentives to do that. It's important we provide incentives instead for people to go and be productive citizens. Property taxes are they're painful, but they're not a tax on personal income. They're not a tax on economic growth in the same way, and same with sales or gross receipts taxes. We don't support any tax increases, but given the economic incentives, it's better to tax consumption than to tax economic activity, and so New Mexico should be moving away from those kinds of taxes.
Now, while economic times remain tough here, across the country, New Mexico has a very tight budget. The last thing we need is policymakers considering to increase taxes. Now, election is right around the corner; it's upon us right now, and New Mexicans are going to go cast their vote. Of course, by doing that, that's the next government. Now, in what ways can our elected officials capitalize on success of pro-growth income tax cuts or eliminate personal state income taxes?
Well, the number one thing that either elected official and all the legislators, when the new legislature convenes in January, need to consider is cutting spending and restraining spending growth and making government as efficient as possible. The one thing, we certainly criticized Richardson both in this study and in previous reports for for doing too much to allow spending to grow. We've criticized him for the rail runner and the spaceport and some of his other kind of what we consider pie in the sky programs. If he'd focused on the tax cuts and focused on really making New Mexico a more economically competitive place, we would have jumped several spots. We might have even been out of the bottom 10 in terms of economic progress. So we're not in a period where I think either governor candidate is going to cut taxes right away just because they're going to be facing upwards of a $400 million maybe deficit come January. So the important thing is not to raise taxes, cut spending, make government more efficient, really do things that can spur long-term economic growth. And then when the economy turns around, we will be in a position to go ahead and make the cuts we need to actually get into that, middle tier or even upper tier of states in terms of attractiveness to business and wealth. And that ultimately makes life better for all of us, because that's really what this number is about, is making day-to-day life for all New Mexicans better in the long term.
What else did this study unveil that you would like viewers to know about this morning?
Well, I think the comparison and the contrast between Oklahoma and New Mexico is really important. It shows that it's not just New Mexico, one policy that did it. Oklahoma had the same success. And what I like to say is that, we're also talking a lot about the Bush tax cuts in Congress in Washington, D.C. And so it's tough to tell how those tax cuts impacted America as a whole, because, we had a lot of economic crises. We had 9/11. We've had the downturn recently. When you have state-level tax cuts and state policies driving the debate, it's much easier to get those comparisons, and you can actually see what policies succeed and what policies maybe don't succeed, and you can compare across state lines. That's why the Founding Fathers came up with a Constitution, to allow the states to drive the policy decisions rather than everything coming out of Washington, D.C. So I think if we could drive the policy at the state level and make those decisions, rightly or wrongly, in the state capitals, we'd be all better off.
Now, how do we get policymakers to look at the gross receipt tax and with this issue?
Well, this is focused on income taxes, but the gross receipts tax does affect incomes. It does affect businesses. The tax increased last legislative session. The gross receipts tax did, along with a handful of other taxes. One of the things that really drives the need to reduce or eliminate our personal income taxes, because the gross receipts tax that we have in New Mexico is much different from traditional sales taxes in other states. So we are already taxing a lot of economic activity through the gross receipts tax that goes completely untaxed in other states. And so we don't advocate raising the gross receipts tax. We think that through spending constraint and limitations and reforms to government, that we can easily get by with a gross receipts tax and property taxes, that we can eliminate entirely this income tax. So there's another school of thought that says we should reform the gross receipts tax, but most New Mexicans don't understand the complexities of the gross receipts tax. They understand when they take home their personal income, their income tax statement, and they see that money being taken out. They understand that reality. And the reality is that these studies have shown that eliminating or reducing that income tax has a positive impact. So it's just a matter of the gross receipts tax is very complicated and very difficult to sell as a vehicle for cutting those taxes. So we think the personal income tax is the way to go, while constraining what we've seen in terms of the growth and the gross receipts tax has been an increase year after year.
Now, we have 30 seconds left in our interview this morning, Paul, but any final thought for our viewers this morning?
Well, I would suggest they go online to www.riograndefoundation.org. They can take a look at the study. It's a brief 5 to 6 page report. Support the Rio Grande Foundation and sign up for our email alerts and find out more about what we do and how we try to support New Mexico's economic future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Margaret.
Please don't go away. We'll be right back. Great. Awesome.
Good.
Thank you. Did you get them all, Daniel? Okay.
Tried to hold them up for a while.
Yeah.
And steady.
Yeah, because when you were doing it, it was nice because I saw him zooming in on it, so.
But you can have these if you want. I don't know.
Actually, yeah, well, reason being, because if Gary gets back, I could have him actually zoom in
Sure.
so it takes up the whole screen.
Okay.
So, thank you so much.